Final thoughts on the UConn men. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point, will you please, to drop in every week. Now, while all eyes are on the UConn women and their quest for a sixth national championship, the curtain dropped on a dismal season for the UConn men. 18 wins, 16 losses, 1 year after their third Final Four appearance, and as the window closes on a Hall of Fame coaching career. Today, Hartford Courant UConn beat writer Mike Anthony looks back at this lackluster season and ahead to what we can expect next year. In our second segment, we go from the health of the UConn men's program to landmark health care legislation. Economist Fred McKinney and healthcare advocate Francis Padilla tell us what this groundbreaking law means for Connecticut and for you. And then we'll wrap things up with some insight from Hartford Courant columnist Rick Green about Connecticut's parole system 3 years after those horrifying murders in Cheshire. But first, a horrible season for a once heralded basketball team, Mike Anthony, the hardest guy in show business to get a hold of. I've been working on getting you on here for 5 years now, getting you on radio and TV. Finally got you.
Well,
welcome.
I apologize for the delay. Many reasons factor into that. The season is a grind, but I certainly am glad we made this happen. Glad to be here with you.
Well, good to have you here. So this was a tumultuous season. You have sort of landmark wins. You beat UConn beats Villanova. They give Kentucky all they can handle. They give Georgetown all they can handle. Beat West Virginia. But yet to have these games where they just tanked.
Yeah, up and down all season. Unfortunately, a few more times down than was needed. Really, as I've said, it's the first season in a while where there was really no feel to it. A few years ago when they won 17 and 14 and 06, 07, it had a feel, it had a bad feel. You knew that team probably wasn't going anywhere. It was all freshmen and sophomores, no juniors or seniors. This was a little different, so this makes this, I think, just a little bit more disappointing based on the expectations, not necessarily from the national media or anyone, but from even within the coaching spec. They expected more. This was an experienced team with some seniors, some really talented kids who certainly had some shortcomings and some ups and downs and didn't necessarily have the support that they needed throughout.
I said it before, I'll say it again. It speaks to leadership. Somewhere there's a lack of leadership when you have returning seniors, a team that was ranked 12th coming in. Whose team was this?
That's an excellent question. You could say it was Jerome Dyson's team. You could say then it became Kemba Walker's team. It was all their team. But last year you could point to the success last year and look at the point guard position and say that was A.J. Price's team. And clearly a few times this year when things were going awry, they needed a guy like that to take hold and grab somebody by the jersey and really be kind of a coach on the floor. They didn't really have that this season. I don't think it wasn't for a lack of these kids trying to take hold of things, giving 100% on most nights. But I questioned their basketball IQ. I questioned their confidence. It seemed like whenever they got down, whether it be for a couple minutes within a game or for a few games within the course of the season, they couldn't pick themselves back up quickly enough. They did on occasion. Like you said, they had some big wins. They had some really exciting wins. They played really well even in some tough losses early on, like you mentioned Kentucky, but they couldn't sustain that.
So what happens next time? You have a whole new group coming in next year, a coach coming back who's been on the mend. This is going to be a rebuilding program. And hanging out there, does Jim Calhoun have the energy and the fire that he requires to build this thing back again? That's the big question looming out there, right? I
think so. Anyone who's been around the man knows he's built on energy and fire, and he wouldn't have agreed to come back if he was going to come back with an 80% effort. He's into it. He's 100% into it. He's excited for it. Now, there are some major questions regarding next year. You're losing 3 key seniors. You hope to have Kemba Walker back, which I expect him to come back. He hasn't committed to returning for his junior year, but I certainly expect him back.
Could be the best point guard in the country or among the best point guards.
He will be in the conversation, I would think. He's certainly the most exciting point guard in the country, among the most exciting point guards in the country. If he can solidify some of the things he needs to work on and be a little more consistent, a little less erratic, certainly he'd be among the best point guards in the country, yeah.
There's a 4-year contract out there that Jim Calhoun has not signed. Right. And I'm curious, you're as close to the program as anyone. Why hasn't he signed his contract? He's 67 years old. He's had some health issues. There's always this NCAA stuff looming. Right. Why wouldn't he sign that thing as quick as it's put down there?
Well, I think there's a few things that factor into it. I think, first of all, it always takes a little longer, it seems, particularly at UConn, to get these things pushed through and absolutely finalized. Whether it's 99.9% done, it's not official. It hasn't been signed. But it's been moving along. There have been no snags from what I understand. It's going to be signed. I think also with Jim Calhoun taking a 7-game leave, it would have looked a little funny if he came back and 3 days later they announced it. A hike in tuition. Mm-hmm. A lot of different things factor into this from a logistical standpoint and a public perception standpoint, I would think.
So it's not on his end why the delay is there? It's more the
I don't
process?
think so, Stan. I'm sure there's been some back and forth between the school and him, and mostly with Calhoun's agent. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure as you get towards the tail end of something this complicated and something this large, there's some back and forth. I don't know that anyone's to blame. I don't know that necessarily any blame even needs to be assigned. I think it's just one of these things that has kind of been agreed upon in principle, and when it'll certainly be made official before it needs, when it needs to be.
A little friction I'm detecting between Coach Calhoun and the AD Jeff Hathaway. Is that normal, or is that something that people keep their eye on?
I think so. I don't know how much weight to put on that, and I don't know to what degree that goes. I know their relationship is relatively frosty, certainly in comparison to some other coaches and ADs across the country. But I can't pretend to have been in the room when they've had every conversation they've had over the years. Certainly, there's been a bit of a disconnect, and I don't think they have the proper communication. But I don't know necessarily to what degree, and to what degree that might affect how one another does their job.
Mm-hmm. They kind of stay out. Each person stay in their own lane, right?
So you do your job, I'll do my job, and we'll chat when we have to.
All right, now this week, Coach Calhoun will meet with the media horde and discuss the postseason and next season. What do you suspect he'll say as far as what's going to go on for next year?
That's an interesting question right there, and he probably will meet with the media as it typically does about a week or two after the season ends, and kind of wrap up and look forward, and as he likes to say, address who we are, what we are, where we're headed, what we can do.
Where are they headed?
Where are they headed? It's long term. I don't know, because I think as soon as Calhoun retires, whether it is in a year or 7 years, the program immediately takes a step back. It has to. That much is given. And in the meantime, you wonder without a practice facility about taking a minor hit in recruiting. Calhoun feared that they would take a hit in recruiting with all the rumors being floated about that he was going to retire. Mm-hmm. And now, even that he's made clear that he's going to be back, certainly anyone who commits to the UConn program is going to be told by other coaches out there that, hey, sure, he's coming back, but if you plan to be there 2 or 3 years, are you sure he's going to be there the whole time? Do you want to subject yourself to a potentially tumultuous environment? Towards the tail end of any career like this, and again, whether it's 1 year or, say, 7 years, we're at the tail end. It's been 38 years. There's going to be some question marks. There's going to be different ways you have to address things, different things you have to defend, and different ways you have to go about things.
Lost in all this is that last year, this team was in the Final Four, and people seem to have a very short-term memory here in Connecticut, right? This was the Final Four team last year.
Yeah.
Was this season, in hindsight, or in foresight, a hiccup, or is it a signal of more troubling things that happen down the road?
I would say my initial thought is that it's a hiccup, and I don't see UConn falling towards the bottom of the Big East or anything. And it is important to remember they've been to 3 Final Fours in 12 years. They were in the Final Four 11 and a half months ago. The program is not in disarray. This was a very disappointing season, but that only speaks to the standards they've set and the excellence they've achieved over the years. I don't think they're in for a major drop, but there are some question marks, and starting immediately with what happens next year?
Calhoun is in 5 seconds. Jim Calhoun, he's the elephant in the room. To what degree can he be healthy? Will he have the energy? And will recruits come there or not come there because of him?
Right. Who will come in to help next year? And how will the young kids who didn't offer much help this year develop?
Right. He's Mike Anthony. Finally got him in, folks. It took me 5 years to get him in here. All right, when we come back, folks, we'll talk about groundbreaking legislation with health care, what it means for Connecticut, what it means for you. You are watching the Stan Simpson Show in full HD.